Hello, good morning. Am I audible? Okay, shall we start the lecture? Okay, fine. So let's start. So we were discussing about this type conversion and various issues that we saw when these conversions need to take place. So conversion is actually converting one object of one type to another. And as we have discussed extensively yesterday, a lot of work needs to be done by the implementation in order to perform these conversions. And some issues might also be there where we might need to make some runtime checks before a conversion is allowed. Okay, some languages do make that runtime check, and therefore they are strongly typed and more safe than those languages which do not perform any check. And the languages which do not perform any check typically don't want to have any runtime overheads, such so that the execution is faster. But then they put a lot of cognitive load on the programmer, and because of that, if the programmer is not really careful, then there could be some errors that might creep in. And, not always, but sometimes that errors might creep in, which would be very tough to debug. Okay, let's continue from this point onwards, and let me just show one program. So, which is about comparing a real number. So let's take a look at this code snippet. So here we have a constant named e, value is 0.01, and we have one uh, floating point number, floating point variable f, which we read from the terminal, and then we have a loop which says while f is not equal to 0, we subtract this number e from f, and inside the loop we print this value hello. And let's make an assumption that the user, when it is prompted to give input a value of f, the user is inputting some positive number such as 1.0, something of that sort. So what will happen, let's say if the user enters 1.0 as the number f, what will happen? What will this piece of code do? Or just let me put a more general question. So do you, okay, Vishaka is saying it will print 100 times or certain number of times this hello will be printed. Okay. Oh, Pulkit is saying that f might not reach exactly 0, so it might go to an infinite loop. Why is it that you are saying this, Pulkit? Could you please unmute? Yeah, float can always be compared to an integer actually. So that's not a problem. Even if I had written zero point 0, uh, well, Pulkit is saying floating point operations aren't accurate. What do you mean by that? You are right, actually. You are right in stating this that one should be careful when we write such a piece of code. Yeah, they have limited precision. So let's say the user has entered some number f, some number such as 1.0 or 1.1. We know that this 1.1 has to be converted into a bit pattern that we had discussed about this IEEE 754 standard, which actually has this mantissa and exponent component. And then this 0.01 would also have a bit pattern. Okay, similar, prepared in a similar manner. Then when we perform this subtraction, so there is this floating point subtractor which works. So here, it will try to adjust the exponents and subtract the significance, and the subtractant would be the value that is the new bit pattern that gets computed. So while this keeps on happening, it might just be the case that we would never reach this bit pattern which corresponds to a number 0 in floating point. The number 0 in floating point would have a sign bit which is 0. All the exponent bits would also be 0, and all the significant bits will also be 0. So that kind of bit pattern might never be reached. And if we make this exact comparison of f with this bit pattern corresponding to 0, since that might never reach, we might actually have this issue of this loop being executed infinite times. Same is the situation if we compare two real values. So let's say I had another variable, say f1, and I said while f is not equal to f1, assuming f1 is a value lower than f, and inside the loop I say f is f minus e, we might still have the same issue that the number that is that the bit pattern that gets computed might never be equal to the bit pattern of the other number f1, and therefore the loop might never terminate. So one has to be really careful about comparing real numbers because we might enter into this infinite loop issue. Then what's the solution? And suppose the application requires that two real numbers need to be computed or need to be compared, then what's the solution? Okay, so Prabhav Sai is saying we keep a minimum error value. Yeah, so, set a certain a precision constraint that the difference must be less than some precision. So at least eventually, that precision might be obtained, and therefore we might, we will come out of the loop. So this is specifically a problem with this equality checking. If it is something like less than, greater than, we will not have an issue. But since equality checking is a problem, we typically use some sort of precision constraint. So now you know why this is to be done once, because we now know a little bit in detail about how these floating point numbers are being presented inside. Okay, so let's proceed. So we are discussing about type checking itself, and let's talk about this issue on coercion. So coercion. So we talked of conversion, where an object of one data type is converted to another by an instruction given by the programmer, while coercion is something which is implicit. That is, the language itself has some rules with which it decides whether a particular object of a certain data type is to be converted into an object of right. So this is an example. So here, we have this a as an integer and b and c as real numbers, and then we have a statement where C is to be assigned this value A plus B. Okay, and since one of the operands of A is a real number, so what we expect is that the other operand, which is not a real number, would get converted into real automatically or implicitly by language implementation. And then we perform this real number addition, and the result would then be assigned to this number C. So here is where the language is supposed to convert this A automatically from an integer to a real number. And the conversion is essentially the same as we have discussed earlier. So A would be in a two's complement form. We have to convert that into this 32-bit or 64-bit floating point IEEE 754 standard. So that bit pattern has to be obtained, and we discussed how that can be obtained. And then we invoke this floating point addition to get the sum. Right. So many languages or most languages will allow this operation to go through. That is, they will perform this type conversion on their own, and this is called as coercion. Okay, and there are rules which say in such and such situations what needs to be done, and so on and so forth. So various languages take different views in order to permit these coercions to take place. So coercion typically is based on the type of the operands, and in some situations it can also take into account the expected type from the surrounding context. So when we make an operation, what is it that is expected? And based on that, it might also make a decision. But typically, it makes decisions on the types of the operands. And most often, the rules are that an operand, if it is less general in form, it is converted into a more general type. So if the type of an operand is an int, it gets converted into float, and if if the other operand is also float. If one of the operands is double, then the second operand also gets converted into double and so on. So Fortran had these lots of rules which had coercion there, and all of us know C also has lots of rules for coercion, and which are pretty intuitive. So the rules say that all floating point numbers in expressions are converted into double, and these types short, int, and char, all of them become int when they are used in some expressions. And when the left hand side is actually something which is not as generic as the operation or the result of the operation that is produced on the right hand side, then there might be loss of precision that might take place here. Okay, so C permits to do that, while some languages will actually say that maybe they will give an error itself and will not compile the program completely, but at least they would give some warning saying that with this expression there can be a loss in precision, so that the programmer is careful. So in a way, the coercion rules are actually are relaxing this type checking process. So strict type checking would not allow any coercion to take place at all. So that is, if two objects are not of the same type, they just are no operation is allowed on them, which is kind of extremely strict. And the coercion allows those operations to go through under certain rules which are well defined. But recently people have said that it actually might not be a very good idea to have these coercions taking place. And Ada was one language which did not allow coercions to happen, or very few coercions were allowed, and little more were allowed in Fortran and Pascal, and then C++ have a huge number of coercions that take place, And as we will see in a few examples which we will be discussing today, so quotients is extremely tough for one to understand, and what really happens when quotient takes place is really difficult. Definitely it is difficult, or it may not be foreseen by the program writer because he had some view in mind. But what might happen at runtime with some peculiar values can be really funny. So let's take this case, this example here. So let's assume that we have an a short int s. Okay, short int is a shortened version of the integer data type. If we make the assumption that the integer is actually 32-bit, then the shortened version might be something like a 16-bit entity. Okay, and then we have this the second variable L, which is unsigned long int. So C has this type. You can prefix this word long to an integer type, which where the compiler, you know, doesn't make an assurance, so to say, but it tries to give a longer version of the integer. And if, many language implementations need not absolutely take it that way. So, for example, if the integer, the native integer support from the hardware is say 32-bit, then some language implementations take this long int to be implemented as a 64-bit number. While some language implementation, that is the same C programming language, but if the compiler is different, might not actually allow that flexibility. So it might treat that int to be as the long int to be as big as the native integer supported there. So whether to take it or not is dependent on the language implementation, and C purposely decided to give that choice or give that flexibility to the language implementation. And then we have a char, which is this variable C. So how the character itself needs to be implemented is to be represented is again implementation dependent. So in some language implementations or some C compilers treat char as an unsigned number of 8 bits, and some others might treat char as a signed number of 8 bits, because in C we could use a character which wherever we could perform some integer arithmetic as well. So this is also implementation dependent. Then there is a variable float f, which is of type float. So assume that the float is implemented using IEEE single precision form, which is say 32-bit. And then there is another variable d, which is of type double. So assume it is implemented as IEEE double precision format, so 64 bits. And the length of these variables, the number of bits are given here respectively. So S is 16-bit, L is 32-bit, C is 8-bit, F is 32-bit, and D is 64-bit. Okay, so those are the definitions of the variables. And now let's say somewhere the user has written this program that S is equal to L. So what is done out here? So any guess what would the system do? Don't run the program. Let's think a little bit logically here. What should happen? And even if you run the program, on the machine you will get certain answer, but on some other machine you might get something else. So that also is something we should keep in mind. Okay, Nitin Kumar is saying that the first 16 bits. So first, you mean to say the lower order or the higher order? which bits need to be taken? Should it be the lower order bits or should it be the higher order bits? Okay, so Nitin Kumar is saying it should be lower order bits. Okay, so the lower order 16 bits of L are taken, and that bit pattern is then assigned to this S variable S. Okay, and how do we treat this variable S now? Remember, S is short int, and we have not prefixed any signed or unsigned keyword out there. So this S actually might, if we just copy the bit pattern, it actually might become a negative number, even though the earlier L was a positive number because it was unsigned there. But since let's assume that the 16th bit or bit number 15 had a value 1, so even though earlier it had a value uh, which was representing a positive integer, now actually becomes a negative integer because this S, we have simply copied the bit pattern, and the most significant bit out there has turned out to be 1. So let's see what exactly is done. And Nitin Kumar is correct. So else lower order bits are copied into S, and that number S is now interpreted as a signed number. Well, Nitin Kumar has a question that why can't we just copy 15 bits and uh, allow it to do that? Well, language implementations do have a choice of doing what we are discussing out here, which will say that at least the number S will not be a negative number. But this is what really happens. So the actual language implementations will actually, you know, just copy. Well, since we are copying something which is of a longer length to something which is of a shorter length, there is always this risk about not maintaining the original value anyway. Whether we have the 16 bit as 1 or 0, it doesn't matter because the rest of the bits 17th onwards we are not really able to copy. Yeah, that's right. So that's what Nitin Kumar is also saying. So there is a loss of value, but what is happening here is it's not just the loss of value. Even the sign bit has changed if we take it that way. And this is what is done by typical C compilers. And you may decide to check on this later. So let's proceed now. Let's say we make the other assignment in the other way. Instead of shorter longer to a shorter assignment, a shorter to a longer assignment. What do you think will happen here? That is, L is assigned to S. Yes, what will happen? Yeah, yeah. Again, yeah, Pulkit is right. So here, what is done again is that the bit pattern of S, which is this 16 bits, is copied into the lower order 16 bits of L. Okay, okay, and then if the if if the bit pattern actually talked of a positive number, everything is fine. But what if S is negative? Well, what really happens is something which let me show this slide instead of having this you know, mystery out there. So what is done is S is sign extended to the longer length, and then its bits are interpreted as an unsigned number. Okay, so what we do, so we have discussed about sign extension yesterday, right? Or a few lectures back, where we say that in order to represent a negative number into a larger length size, what is done is we take the sign bit and extend it right through for the longer length. So here S was initially 16 bit. If the most significant bit out there was 0, then 0 straight away goes into the 32-bit number, because we want to represent this S now as a 32-bit number. So this 0 is copied right through from the bit number 16 to 31. Okay, if whatever that value of the bit might be. If it was 0, so 0 gets copied. Otherwise, if it was 1, 1 gets copied. So that is the sign extension of this variable S into this longer length. And now, since the this bit pattern which is now assigned to L, and L is an unsigned number, so that value is actually interpreted as an unsigned number. Okay, so even though, so if S was negative, what we get in L would be a positive number here, because L is unsigned. Okay, which actually, that's what these C language implementations do, and which actually might be counterintuitive. Okay, but this is what is done. Let's take the third case, that S is equal to C. So C is a, yeah, okay. If C is interpreted as a signed number, then we don't have a problem. What do we need to do is perform this sign extension. Okay, we will need to do that sign extension to convert it into a short of 16 bits. C was, by the way, just an 8-bit number. Okay, but however, if C is treated as unsigned, and let's see what is done out here. So if C is implemented as a signed number, then we sign extend it, and that the extended number would be treated as a signed short number. And if C is implemented, that's a char is implemented as an unsigned number, then it is 0 extended. So that is, irrespective of what the most significant bit of this variable C is, we will just straight away, prefix everything with 0, the rest of the 16 bits as 0, and then that number would be interpreted as a signed number. Okay, so that's what happens out here. Right. Now let's take the next case. What will happen if we say F equal to L? L was this long int and F is a single precision floating point number. Yes, this is type conversion, correct? So L, which was a bit pattern of 32 bits, now needs to be converted into another bit pattern of the same length, that is 32 bit. However, the representation is different. It is this floating point representation that needs to be used. So we will now convert that F into, split it into exponent and the significand or the mantissa, and get those values of the bits corresponding to both of these, and then store it out there. Okay, so L is converted to a floating point number, and since F has fewer significant bits, some precision may be lost. And that is something which I wish to emphasize on. Okay, how can this happen? Why can there be a precision loss here? Yes, anybody? Would you like to unmute?
Sir, like floating point uses 23 bits, while double, I guess, uses 51. So we
So
just
we
need
are
to
having
add.
F here. F here is a floating point number which has 23 bit. Yeah, double uses something like 53. Correct.
52. So
50.
we just need to add extra zeros in the double value. And similarly, we need to just do the same for exponent.
No,
So
I'm
there
yeah.
would,
No, I'm just talking of this the earlier thing F equal to L. I have not yet come to D equal to F yet. So with F equal to L, why would there would be a precision loss?
because in F we are only using 23 bits for
Yes.
representing the digits, while in uh, it's long,
L.
we are
Yeah.
using
L
32
we
or
have
64
32.
bits.
Yeah. Correct. Correct. That's right. And what about this D equal to F now?
There will be no precision loss because in F we have 23 bits, while in D we have 52 bits for a
Correct.
significant. So we just need to add extra zeros or ones. We need to add extra zeros, and similarly we can do the same for exponents also.
Correct. That's right. So there is so since D is of a longer length, we don't have an issue out here. Fine. And what about this shorter length conversion now? F equal to D. Well, this is what happens. So D is converted to a shorter form. So of course there could be loss of precision. And if D's value cannot be represented in the single precision form that is F, the result is undefined. Okay, but the C compilers do not give any dynamic semantic error. Undefined in the sense it just copies some bits, the best possible copy which it could do, and prepare a bit pattern for F, but that number might be entirely different than what was the corresponding number for this variable t. Okay, so which means that whenever we write these such statements where there is implicit conversion or this coercion that is taking place, we need to be really careful. Then in that situation, either we have to refer to the language manual, or otherwise we could actually force things to be of a certain type by using the type conversion option. And because of these reasons, these things that the program's behavior might be totally unpredictable and ambiguous in some situations. Right. So like we need to be informed about this. That's all. So there is a difference between type conversion, which is like explicit, and type coercion, which is implicit. And the C programming language uses this word cast, that is type casting for type conversion. So casting here would mean forcibly converting from one to another. And finally, there is also what is called as a non-converting typecast, which is actually supported in languages like C++, and it can also be in some way simulated in C. And this is a this particular statement. So let's assume that in series for n. Okay, so a variable, an integer variable L n, and it actually what we do in this particular statement is we fetch address of that particular variable. So the address is actually a pointer to an int, and then that particular pointer we typecast it into a pointer to a float type. Okay, and since we know that on any machine the size of the pointer always remains the same, so this is something which we will cover up in detail again later on. But let's talk of a 32-bit machine, so which actually means that the address bus of that processor is 32-bit. And since pointing of the type of the object they are pointing to. Okay, so if the processor is 64-bit, all addresses will be 64-bit. So whenever we typecast uh, from pointing to one type of an object to pointing to another type of an object, what we are essentially saying that there is no change in the value out here, value of the pointer, I would say, but the way we look at the pointer now, it is different. So initially it was this particular pointer, the address of n was pointing to an integer. Now we have converted into a pointer to a float, so it is now interpreted as a this pointer is pointing to a floating point number. And then if we take contents of all this, so the same bit pattern now is treated as a floating point number. And we know that the representation of this floating point number has this exponent and 90 sign and so on. So here, actually, what we have done is we have the same bit pattern, have not made any changes to the bit pattern, and have just treated the same bit pattern as if it belongs to some other type. But what about the value? Will it have any relation to the value of the earlier object? Yeah. Pulkit is correct. And so is object might be anything, whatever equivalent 754 value for that particular bit pattern which corresponded to integer variable. Okay, so we are not sure about the value. Tasks were provided, etc., so on. Well, there are historic reasons where we need to do some low-level programming, where we have to treat the bits, or don't alter the bits, but then treat it differently. So that kind of facility is provided in languages like C, where we have so many types of non-converting typecasts available. Especially the C++ language, it is extremely complicated, and there are so many rules out there. So really, if we want to have a program in C++, we keep the manual with us. That is this the C++ programming language by Strauss-Trup, where most people are confident about writing their piece of code. Understand what this means. So we are just interpreting the bits out here of different types. This is about type checking, and so far we have just discussed about the basic data types, the primitive data types, the numeric types, the booleans, and so on. So what we now will be talking of is these collections of data. That is the types where there are multiple data values stored together. So something like a structure or a record, or an array, and so on. So, and of course, later on we will be starting with pointers. So that is how we would progress now. So I'm seeing some nice discussion. So Nitin had talked about float. I hope Pulkit's answer made this. So yeah, so R equal to star, float star, and then I think it is possible in C or in C++, even if the sizes of R and N are entirely different. I think so. You will need to try it out on some implementations, but I suspect that this is possible, and that creates all the more confusion. Ideally, it should not be permitted. Okay, but I think it is permitted. Okay, so this ends the presentation actually. So if you are all okay, we can start with uh, structured types or composite types today, or we can take it up in the next values. Yeah, yeah, Pulkit is right. So we'll get some garbage values. So along with whatever bits were there for n, it will also take the other bits of the next thing that gets represented, and that's what will be treated as a real number now. Okay, and then whatever bit pattern represents whichever value, that is the value that we uh, used for this variable r. But I think the compiler will not give any error out here. It will allow these things to go through. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes or so. So should we start with composite types in this lecture, or we'll start it from the next one? Of course, if there is anything to discuss now about these basic types, I would be happy. Okay, so let me not start with composite types today. So let me make the announcement of the second assignment, even though I know that the first assignment is due on 23rd midnight. But just to give you a head start, let me talk about the second assignment. And the second assignment is about implementation of this big int data type. Okay, I have just typed it down. So you have to implement a big integer data type, okay, which is a large integer of size 1024 bits. And assume that the hardware supports 64 bits. So we want to support a 1024 bit, and then support plus, minus, and multiply. Just these three operations on objects of this big int type. And this has to be done in C programming languages without using any libraries. Okay, do not use any libraries. You have to implement it yourself. So then you will be able to understand how those libraries would be implementing this big int data type. Java has a big int implementation on its own. Please don't use that. So we want to learn actually how to implement a big integer using the basic primitive integer that we have, for which we have the hardware support. Okay, so please be little careful about what representation would you use to represent this big integer, and then implement these operations. The representation is key, and based on the way you represent, the most efficient representations would obviously get more credit than those which are not really efficient. So no. Uh, so Pulkit is asking whether we could use classes out here. Well, for this, I would urge you to do it in plain C. Well, there is nothing much about class here, just three, operations which we are supporting. So you may choose to use classes, but then don't use any of those libraries which might be there. I'm not sure. Some C++ implementations might actually have a library, an STL support for big int or something like that. I'm not sure about it. So if you use just the plain C++ thing, that would be fine. And Vishakha's question is whether we should use negative also, that negative numbers also. So I think first start with positive numbers, and negative numbers are a little more tricky to handle because of this 2's complement form. So once you are through with the positive numbers and you are sure that it works fine, then consider negative numbers as well. Yeah. So as before, I would be giving out this assignment formally by preparing a file. And for all the assignments that we would be making, we should have this video that you would need to create about how you have developed the code and also how this code runs. So we need to have this video for all assignments that we will be having for this course. So are there any other questions related to the assignment or related to what we have discussed today in today's lecture? Right. So if there are no questions, so shall we end the lecture? Thank you. Thank you.